You won't believe what happened next. It was a quiet day at the local auction house. Nothing out of the ordinary. The usual animals were up for bidding: cows, pigs, and the like. But what no one could predict was the dog that would steal the spotlight and change everything. This is the story of a dog named Benny, a boy named Eli, and a chance for redemption that no one saw coming. The sun hung high over the dusty auction lot, casting long shadows over the worn wood and sun-bleached fences. The smell of hay and livestock filled the air as the auctioneer, a grizzled man with a voice that cracked and echoed in the open space, droned on about the animals up for sale. His face was weathered from years of hard work under the sun, and his voice carried the weight of 1,000 sails. "Next up, folks, a real treat. We've got an old hound here," he said, waving toward the pen at the back of the yard. "Starting at $5. As the auctioneer waved his hand toward the pen, the crowd murmured with curiosity. But what limped out wasn't the kind of animal anyone was expecting. It wasn't a prize cow or a healthy pig ready for the butcher. No, what emerged was a scruffy dog. His fur was patchy, his legs weak, and his ears torn. His eyes were dull and filled with exhaustion, the kind of look only a dog who had been through too much could wear. "Next up," the auctioneer continued, his voice trailing off, "one old hound." The dog was dragged into the center of the yard, his movements stiff and slow. His back leg dragged behind him, a sign of an old injury. His fur was matted and his coat was riddled with scars. The crowd shuffled, some turning their heads away in disdain, others watching curiously. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Who's gonna take this poor mutt?" a voice called out from the crowd. Laughter followed. "I'll pay $10 if you just put him out of his misery," another voice chimed in. The auctioneer cleared his throat, glancing nervously at the crowd. "All right, folks, starting at $5, he said again, trying to make it sound more appealing, but no one was interested. The silence hung heavy in the air. People looked away, disinterested, as the sad dog stood limply in the center, completely unnoticed. Then a small voice broke through the indifference. "I'll take him." A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd. People turned and looked toward the back of the lot. Standing there, barely able to see over the edge of the rail, was a small boy in a red hoodie. He clutched a crumpled $5 bill tightly in his hand, his face set with determination. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at the boy, their surprise palpable. The auctioneer, unsure of how to respond, hesitated. "You sure, son?" he asked, his tone softening slightly. It was almost kind, as if he was trying to spare the boy from making a mistake. The boy nodded. "He's the one," he said quietly, his voice steady. A few adults shook their heads, muttering under their breath. "What a waste of money," one whispered. But Eli, this boy who didn't even seem old enough to make such a decision, stepped forward. His boots were too big for him, his hands trembling slightly as they handed the $5 over to the auctioneer. No one understood why the boy chose that dog, but it didn't matter. The decision was made. Benny, the dog no one wanted, had a new owner. And that was the beginning of a change neither of them expected. As Benny was led toward him, Eli's heart pounded in his chest. He reached down, gripping the frayed leash with both hands. Benny, who had been treated like an outcast for so long, didn't understand what was happening. He had been discarded like a broken piece of furniture, unwanted and unloved. But as his eyes met Eli's, something flickered. It was a spark of hope, faint but undeniable. Eli led Benny home, their steps slow and careful. The dog limped behind him, hesitant at first, unsure of this new human and the life he was being given. Eli's boots clacked against the sidewalk as he walked, his face a mixture of determination and curiosity. He didn't care what anyone thought. The whispers from people on the sidewalk, the ones who stared and shook their heads, didn't bother him. He was doing what felt right. When they reached home, Eli's father was waiting on the porch. His arms were crossed, his brow furrowed with concern as he looked at Benny, who stood limping behind his son. "What's this?" Eli's father asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and frustration. Eli looked up at him, his voice calm. "He needed me," he said simply. His father didn't respond right away. There was a long silence, one that stretched like a taut rope between them. Finally, after a deep sigh, Eli's dad ran a hand through his hair and said, "Well, he sleeps in the barn." Eli smiled. "That's all he needs." And so, Benny was given a place to sleep, a corner of the barn tucked away on old blankets. At first, Benny didn't move. He stood frozen in the doorway, trembling, unsure of the kindness being offered to him. His past had taught him not to trust. His days of being abandoned, neglected, and mistreated had left deep scars, not just on his body but on his soul. The hours passed as Eli sat quietly a few feet away, not forcing anything, just being there. Benny didn't move, didn't eat, but his ears twitched, listening. The silence between them was thick, but Eli wasn't going to rush. He let Benny take his time. The next morning, Eli came back to the barn with scrambled eggs and a book. He sat down on the ground, reading aloud, though Benny still didn't respond. Benny watched him from across the barn, still distant, still cautious. Eli wasn't in a hurry. By the third day something changed. Eli opened the barn door to find Benny lying on the blankets, still not moving when Eli walked in. But his eyes, those eyes that had once been filled with fear, were softer now. He blinked slowly as if to say, "I'm still here." Eli didn't rush forward to pet him. He didn't cheer or get excited. He just sat down beside the water bowl and started talking again. He didn't know it, but he was naming the dog. Benny. A name that felt right, even though it was a name he had once had, a name that had been lost in the chaos of his life. And so it began, Eli and Benny, two broken souls finding comfort in each other. Benny didn't bark, not yet, and he still flinched at sudden movements or loud noises. But he started to follow Eli around the yard, staying close to him at all times. It wasn't trust yet, but it was something. Eli's dad had been watching from the kitchen window. At first he said nothing, but little by little, he started leaving bits of leftover stew near the barn door for Benny. There was no fanfare, no declarations, just small acts of kindness. And slowly Benny's fear faded. Not entirely, not yet. But it was a beginning. One Saturday afternoon, the world finally began to warm after a long, harsh winter. Eli went exploring near the woods behind the house, following the creek that snaked through the trees. Benny limped quietly behind him, tail low but wagging. It had become their routine, their quiet adventures together. Eli came upon an old shed, half covered in ivy, and felt an odd curiosity. "I'll be right back," he said to Benny with a grin. But the floorboards inside the shed were old and weak, and with a sudden crack, one of them gave way beneath Eli's feet. He dropped through the hole with a shout, landing hard in the shallow hole beneath. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he was stuck. A heavy board had pinned his leg. "Benny," he called, panic rising. "Help." Above him, Benny barked for the first time. A sharp, echoing sound that pierced the woods. Then Benny disappeared from the doorway. Eli's heart raced. He tried to push the board, but it wouldn't budge. Tears stung his eyes and the silence felt deafening. Minutes later, Benny's barking erupted in the distance. Eli's dad, hearing the barking, had just stepped outside. Benny sprinted, limping furiously toward him. His eyes were wide, filled with panic. Eli's dad followed the dog into the woods, and they found Eli about 15 minutes later, still pinned but safe. He was shaken but unharmed. Benny stood nearby, tail wagging, dirt on his nose, watching them both. Eli clung to the dog, his face buried in Benny's fur. "You found help," he whispered. "You saved me." The news spread fast. Benny, the broken dog no one wanted, had become a hero. It started with a post on the local community board, a picture of Benny and Eli, both covered in dirt. The caption read, "This dog no one wanted just saved my son's life." The photo went viral. Within hours it was shared by hundreds, then thousands. People from all over started commenting. "What a good boy. Never judge a dog by a limp. That kid saw something the rest of us missed." The local news called that afternoon for an interview. When asked why he chose Benny, Eli shrugged and said, "He looked like he needed someone. I know how that feels." The reporter was silent for a moment before responding, "I think he saved more than just you." Benny had given Eli more than just a companion. He'd saved his life, but in doing so, Benny had saved both of them. In the days that followed, something incredible happened. People who had once judged Benny for his limp, for his sad eyes, began to see him differently. Eli, with his quiet confidence and belief in second chances, had shown everyone that even the most broken creatures have worth. And just like Benny, Eli had found his second chance, his opportunity to be seen and valued for the first time in a long while. Benny and Eli had found each other. Two broken souls who saved one another in the most unexpected way. If you believe in second chances, in the power of kindness to transform lives, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Let's make the world a little brighter, one second chance at a time.